communication leaders. Mark is a professor at Illinois Central College in Peoria, Illinois, and a true professional and expert when it comes to both our Adobe products as well as how to bring them to life for your students. Mark's going to take you through Adobe Voice this morning and talk a little bit about getting started with beginning digital storytelling. Mark, I'll hand it over to you when you're ready.
Thanks very much, Melissa. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen here. Okay, so we should all be able to see Voice. I have it open on my iPad at this point, and when you first open it up, you'll see a screen that looks something like this. To me, the biggest advantage of this tool is it is incredibly easy to use, and it's easy for students to pick up and use as well. So I have students do various assignments using Voice, and I'll actually share with you some of those examples this afternoon in addition to some other materials. But when you come into this initial screen, you'll notice up here at the top there are three choices. We have the ability to explore, to review projects, and look at things we've shared. In this case, what I'm going to do is create a new story. So I click on the Create a New Story, and the first thing it asks is, what's your story about? So we can put some basic information in here. So I'll just go ahead and quickly type. And you just go through, you select Next, and this feature is a really nice thing that I like about Voice, because a lot of times the biggest problem we have when we start to use a tool, even free tools like Voice, is the fact that, my goodness, where do I begin? I open it up and I get all confused and so forth. So it guides you through. We've provided a brief introduction here, and then we can go through, we can promote ideas. We've got a little wheel that we can scroll through. We can explain something. We can do show and tell, teach a lesson. There's all sorts of different things we can do. And so I'm going to basically pick one of these. I could create my own, but when we're first getting started, I find it a best practice to pick one of these initial ones. So I'm just going to pick a Tell What Happened. Once we've scrolled through and selected what we want, we tap Pick this one at the bottom. And now we have some additional information. You'll notice that down here at the bottom we have a timeline, and if I were to tap on the various items in the timeline, you'll see that we get little information that helps us better understand how we go about telling our story, and we can go through, select the various items. So it makes it a little easier. You'll notice, pardon me, in the middle here, we have the ability to include text, photos, and icons. Now, before we get into all the specifics, if we look up at the very top, we'll also see that we have a layout, we have some themes, and we have some music. And this, to me, is one of the biggest advantages to using a tool like Voice, is that the music, we don't have to worry about copyrights, all those things, because it's already taken care of for us. In fact, the icons, if we use icons, those come from the Noun project, and those are provided as with additional information in the credits as well. So we can come over here to Layout, and you'll notice up at the top of the screen, we have the ability to do to show one thing, two things, a full screen photo, and so forth. So I'm just going to choose a full screen photo just as a starting point here, and this would be for the first slide. I can click on this and I can say, oh, where do I want to get the photos from? Well, I want to get them from my iPad. So we'll go into the camera roll on the iPad. We'll scroll through, see if I can find something here of interest. Maybe here is an image that I took from a meeting at school a while back. So you've got you've got basic information, and then you can turn around and you can record information. So you can add different things in. You could, if you wanted, we'll change the layout here just so you can see what two things look like. And if we wanted to, we could include an icon. And these, again, come from the Noun project. So I'll pick something simple like learning. And go ahead and search for that. And it comes back with a number of icons that I might want to use. Since I'm graphically challenged, I find this to be a very helpful environment. So we'll go ahead and we'll pick something like this that shows a little collaboration. So we have information here. We can come in and we could also include some text. As we go through and tell our story. You'll notice down here at the bottom in the timeline, we have additional little captures of each of the items as they go along. If we wanted to, we can come up here and change themes. And you'll notice that the themes are predefined with appropriate colors, if you will. So those of us, again, who are graphically challenged don't have to worry about that. And if we choose things like a different theme in the background, you will notice that the icon has changed. So now we have a white icon on a black background. Likewise, we can change back to a different one. Lots of different choices that we can use here in the way of themes. If we want to have, here's a chalk version, if you will. We also have the ability to include different kinds of music with this, and I'm going to see how well this works. So we click on music here, and I'll move my microphone down and adjust the volume just a bit on my iPad here. So hopefully we will have some audio. And we can listen to, and of course it's not displaying, but that's okay. We can select different themes. Then we can come back to our layout. Again, we can choose different music. And for each of these items, we can then record. And that, to me, is one of the handiest features here. The idea is to keep your recorded items under 10 seconds for each one of these. So in this case, I'm just going to tap and hold on the record button and put some basic information into this. So we held a meeting to discuss some of the features of Adobe Voice. And if we want to, we can then hit the play button and it will play back that information. Of course, you're not getting the audio at the moment for some reason, but we could hold and re-record. We can go on to the next slide. We can record the information, and we can do this one slide after the next. Once we are finished with the overall process, then what we can do is we can say we're ready to share that information with others. So we'll come over here. I'm not actually going to share it, but you'll notice that we have the ability to share it on Facebook. We can share it via email. We can share it on Twitter. We can save it to the camera roll. So in this case, I'm going to say that I want to, we'll go ahead and save it to the camera roll for right now. And all that information is then saved locally. And we'll just say done with respect to that. The other thing that we can do is, in addition to sharing the video, maybe we want to include a cover photo. Maybe we don't like this particular photo as a starting point. Maybe we want to use something else. So we can come in and choose one of the different items within our presentation. We'll go ahead and keep that one the same for now. And we also have the ability to go in and edit credits. So if we wanted to, we could include credits for the photos, the icons. Now the icons themselves will be picked up by Voice. It will go ahead and provide that, so we don't have to worry about those noun project icons that we're using. But we could include something along the lines of photos by, and then whoever took the photos and so forth. We could add our additional credits in as well. If we wanted to, then we could again, we could make this public or private, and we can either share it Facebook, Twitter, or via email. So that's some of the fundamentals of working with this particular tool. I find it very handy, very easy to use. If we click on the home button here for a second, you'll see that there's a number of projects that are already included. Now, if I'm in the middle of working with a project and I decide that, oh, I'm not really finished, I want to go back and do some additional things, all I have to do is tap on the project again, and I can come in. In this case, I have a full screen photo but I really want to have a thing in a full screen photo. So we can go in, we can make changes to this environment as well. So here I'm going to overlay this with some text, and we'll put in here now sometimes because of the theme you may end up with a situation where the text does not always work well with the image that you've chosen in the background. And that's why sometimes it's very easy to come up and select a different theme and then try that particular one out. So we could pick something, obviously that's a hideous example. I told you I was graphically challenged. The chalk one does work fairly well for most things, but again, we've got a number of different themes we can select from. Now, I know one of the questions that people will undoubtedly ask is, can I change the fonts and all that? And the answer is no. You have to work with the themes that are presented here. So if you don't like a particular font, then you're going to have to choose a different theme to try out those options. You'll notice down here at the bottom, when we do select a different theme, we can see all of those items in the timeline that have changed. In this case, the colors have changed significantly. So we'll go ahead and choose a different theme here. And with the exception of the first image in the timeline, which is a full screen photo, everything else changes accordingly with whatever we've selected in the way of a background. So from a layout perspective, we have the ability to include, we'll come over here to a third item, we have the ability to include one thing which has a border around it. We, again, can include an icon from the noun project, a photo, and the photos can come from a variety of sources, or we can also include plain text. We have the ability to include a couple of things, a full screen photo. We can also put a caption in, and the caption would allow us to enter text underneath the photo. We can also do a thing and a full photo. And that sometimes has some interesting effects. So we can have a photo in the background here, and we'll go ahead and just do this on my iPad again from the camera roll. And goodness, let's see if we can find something out here that we could use. It has a nice background to it. And failing miserably, we'll go ahead and choose something like this. And then we can go ahead and include either text or a photo on top of it. So we'll include another photo. And oops, we will scroll through here. And we will choose perhaps this one. So we can have an image on top of an image. And then, oh, by the way, we can actually tap on that image. We should be able to tap on it, and we should be able to zoom in. So we can do a two-finger zoom. So we can make it larger or smaller as need be. And likewise with the external image, we can tap on that image. And we can do the same thing from a two fingers pinch and zoom perspective. So if we wanted to, we could take an approach like this, where we have a moth in the background from China, and then we have a butterfly from the Philippines on top of it. We could then include whatever else we wanted to. Again, from a layout perspective, you can go through and change these layouts. I'm just trying to give you an idea of what some of the different capabilities are that are out there. Icons, you have the ability to search for icons, and it will find a large number. Sometimes the terminology doesn't necessarily work, which means you have to pick a different word, etc. From a photo perspective, I'm going to come back here, and you'll notice that we have the ability to not only choose from our camera roll, but we can choose from Dropbox, and in this case there's a number of other locations that I've also included here. But if we wanted to, we would not be limited just to that. We could also, if we wanted to, go out and take a picture. We can import things from Lightroom, things that we have stored on our Creative Cloud account, or we could pull things in from Facebook or use the camera directly. So there's a number of different choices here that we could use to pull images in as well. Pardon me. When we're all finished, if we've published our work, etc., we come back over here to the home item, and we can see the various projects that we've worked on. We'll talk more about this afternoon, but I use this a great deal to introduce topics, and I also use it to have students tell stories in various classes. So one of the classes that I teach is writing for the World Wide Web, and I try to get students to develop their own videos and include some things with respect to that. So you just get a basic laundry list of all sorts of different things that I have done in the past, and these are what are on my system right now. I can also go out and see the ones that I've shared, and you see there's a list of various, it's a fairly long list of things at this point. If you really need a starting point, you need some additional inspiration from a storytelling perspective, if you go back to this initial Explore, there's a number of different choices. Obviously, they've updated it here for Valentine's Day, but we can scroll down through the list and we can see examples that other teachers and others have done using voice for various things. So I sometimes look through these just to get some inspiration as to what some of the additional choices are that are out there. So lots and lots of different things. Again, I'll come back in here to project, and it's a pretty straightforward, relatively easy to work with. At this point, I think I'm going to stop screen sharing and go back and see what questions we have. I know we're a little bit early here, Melissa, but I do want to make sure that we address questions because a lot of individuals indicated that they had not used voice before. So let me go ahead and stop sharing here, and let's see what questions we have.
So, Mark, we just had this question from Gary about whether there's a limit to how many photos you can use in a project.
No, Gary, I have not found a limit to the number of photos. Now, keep in mind, these, when you tell a story, you want to be relatively brief. I think in terms of short stories, elevator pitches, that sort of thing. But one of the things, I've not found a limit to it other than just the amount of time. So if you want to add in additional series of photos, you can keep doing that. In the voice environment, I didn't mention this on the timeline, there's a little plus, and you can just keep adding additional slides in with your recordings. Obviously, you want to be considerate of your audience. The other thing, too, is you can rearrange the slides. Actually, let me show you a couple of these features as well. So I'm going to go back in here to screen share real quick. And you'll notice down here we have the ability, if I scroll over somewhere, maybe I've got this particular slide selected, I can tap on the plus and I can add a new slide in. And if I decide that, oh gee, I really wanted that particular slide to be somewhere else, I can hold and I can drag and I can rearrange that in the timeline, which is a nice feature. And then if I look at it and decide, you know, I really don't like that particular one, well, if I click on the little up arrow here, which, there we go, I have the ability either to delete that particular slide or I could duplicate the slide. So if I really like this effect with the two butterfly and a moth, I can actually come up here and say I want to duplicate that. But in this case, what I want to do is I want to change the layout. So I can come in here and say, you know, I'm really interested in two things side by side, and it goes ahead and adjusts accordingly. So let me go ahead and stop sharing again. But I don't think there is a limitation to the number of photos that you can include. Like I said, just
And Gary was mentioning that he created a voice where the images were blurred and there was an issue. So I was wondering if maybe it might have been the resolution of the original pictures or maybe a problem with the rendering of the voice. When it gets shared out, it takes a minute to sort of, you saw the timeline going for Mark where it was actually rendering the voice to share. So I wonder if an error didn't happen in that process.
It could be. One of the issues that I've run into is because I use a school network from time to time, is that the speed of the network has an effect. So if I download images from Dropbox, for instance, sometimes the quality is not quite as good. It's almost like the image a preview has downloaded and we have all sorts of dithering with the image. So one of the things seriously I'd check is my connection speed, and then I would make sure that the images look reasonable as they display on the screen in Voice before you actually publish them. Those are the only issues I've run into. I think Melissa's right. It could well be the quality of the image initially, or if that's not the case, it might have something to do with bandwidth issues too.
Siva asks, what's the final format of the digital story?
If you save things, Siva, if you save things to your camera roll, it's going to be in the default. I think that's MP4. So you could then save it to your camera roll, and you could upload it to Vimeo or another site if you wanted to. You could also just upload it directly to somewhere else like YouTube, that sort of thing. It's in a standard format, and you can share that format.
And then, Mark, as you were presenting, Bob and I were chatting back and forth a little bit. The Voice team has added the ability to customize themes to a certain extent, not all of the themes, but a few of them.
Oh,
So,
excellent. Excellent.
yeah. There's a little button that says Customize Theme, and then you can change the fonts and the colors, which is a fun new feature.
You know, I just brought that up. I did not see that initially, so
That's one of
this
the
is
best
good.
things, I think.
I learned from people too. This is wonderful.
Well, I think that's one of the exciting things about Voice is it is one of our new products, and the product team is really engaged, and they want to hear from educators about how this can be a better product for you, for your classroom. So definitely check out the Voice forums and give your feedback. If there are any other final questions for Mark, go ahead and pop them in the chat pod. I'm going to go ahead and switch to this layout here, where I'd love to ask you, please, to tell us how this session was for you. We really value your feedback. I'm also going to put a link here in the chat pod to an education exchange resource focused on what Mark covered in this session. So if you missed anything or if you're looking for additional information, go ahead and check out that resource. I'll also put a link here to all of Mark's resources on the Education Exchange. As I said, Mark's one of our Adobe Education leaders, and it's just such a rich source of inspiration and information about not just our products, but how to make them come alive in the classroom. So I really encourage you to check out the other resources that he's shared. And finally, we have a whole number of these Adobe Apps for Education Live events coming up. And so I'll pop the link in here if you'd like to check out what's next. Go ahead, Mark. Did you want to address Siva's question?
I was going to make a shameless plug for the afternoon session where I'm going to share some additional examples and show you what some of my students have done as well. And let's take a look at the question here as well. Should the iPad stay connected for the app to work? No, it does not have to stay connected to the internet for the app to work. The problem that you run into is if you want to include icons from the Noun project, if you want to pull things in from Dropbox, if you want to do any kind of searches, then obviously you need to have your connection to the internet. But if you just want to work with the app, I've worked with it in airports. I've worked with it in other places where there is no internet connection that I would want to use. Obviously, when it comes time to share, you have to be connected again.
So a question from Jack, can music from iTunes be imported?
I think you can pull things in. I'm hesitating a bit on that because the issue you run into is copyrights. Just because you can doesn't mean you should with respect to certain resources. And one of the problems that I've seen, especially with music and related items, is you want to make sure you have the proper copyright, the proper license to use that, which is where it's nice that they've included a fair amount of music to begin with. They've already taken care of the copyrights, Adobe has. You may have the rights to listen to the music on your particular device. You may not have the rights to share it over the web. That's why I'd be a little cautious about that.
Wonderful. Well, if there are any last questions for Mark, go ahead and pop them into the chat pod. In the meantime, I will also repeat that shameless plug that later this afternoon in about 6.5 hours, I hope I did my math right, we will be having a second session on voice where Mark will be going into more depth, showing you examples and really giving you some ideas on how you might implement voice in your classroom. Mark, I want to thank you so much for taking the time this morning and for being such a great leader for us, and we'll look forward to hearing from you this afternoon.
Thanks very much, Melissa. Everyone have a great day. Thanks for being here.